This story happened during the Soviet era. A company in western Ukraine once bought a cargo truck from another company somewhere in central Russia. Two drivers were sent to bring the vehicle back, Vasily and Petro. Everything went smoothly at first. They reached the company, signed the papers, picked up the truck, and started the long drive home. The weather was good. The truck was in excellent condition. They drove almost without stopping, switching drivers every few hours. Most of the trip was already behind them when the road entered a long stretch of forest. It was late at night. The truck moved slowly through the dark trees. The headlights lit only a narrow strip of road ahead. Vasily was driving. Petro had just woken up in the passenger seat, and then something strange happened. Suddenly a shadow fell across the windshield. At first, Vasily thought it was just a branch from a tree, but then the shadow lifted its arm and began hitting the glass. It was clearly the shape of a human, a head, two arms, a body, but there was no person, only the shadow. The truck kept moving and the shadow moved with it, beating against the windshield as if it was trying to stop them. Vasily felt the hair on his neck rise. He slowly looked at Petro. Petro looked just as terrified. Neither of them said a word. They kept driving. Then suddenly the engine died. The truck rolled to a stop. The shadow froze on the windshield. The forest around them was dark and silent. Strange sounds came from the trees, branches cracking, leaves moving. Then, somewhere far away, they heard a sound. It was hard to tell what it was. Maybe a howl, maybe someone crying. The two men sat frozen in the cab, afraid even to breathe. Then they saw headlights ahead. Another truck was coming down the road. But about 50 feet before reaching them, that truck suddenly stalled too. The drivers stepped out and quickly began sharing what had just happened. The second truck had experienced the same thing. When they entered the forest, a human-shaped shadow suddenly appeared on their side window and started hitting the glass until their engine stopped. The drivers waited nervously for sunrise. Only when the sky began to grow light did they decide to search the forest for the strange sound they had heard. They walked for a long time, following the noise. Sometimes it disappeared, then came back again. Finally, near a tree, they saw something small on the ground. At first, they thought it was just a bundle of cloth. Then they realized it was a child, a small boy, maybe 4 years old, tied to the tree with a rope. He had spent the entire night alone in the forest. He didn't even have the strength to cry anymore. Only a weak rasp came from his throat. One of the drivers picked him up and carried him back to the trucks. When they returned to the road and tried the engines again, both trucks started immediately, without any problems. They drove straight to the nearest police station. Later, the terrible truth became known. The boy's mother had died. His father found another woman, and she told him she would stay with him only if he got rid of the child. So the father took the boy deep into the forest and tied him to a tree. As for the shadow, some of the drivers still believe it was a guardian angel. Perhaps it stopped those trucks on the road so someone would hear the child and save him before morning came. This story was told to me by my grandmother when I was a child. She heard it from her own grandmother. It happened a very long time ago, before the Russian Revolution, somewhere in the forests of eastern Siberia. My great-great-grandmother was about 10 years old then. She had several younger brothers and sisters. Since she was the oldest, her mother often took her along to help with chores. Their father was not around. One day, they went into the forest to gather mushrooms. They didn't notice how late it had become. The forest was slowly getting darker, and her mother said, "Uliana, we need to hurry. We must get out of the forest before night. There are wolves here." They began walking faster. After some time they realized something was wrong. They had lost the path. Soon they reached a lake. Her mother knew the area well and said they should walk along the shore. That way they would eventually reach the village. So they followed the edge of the water. By then it was already night. The moon had risen high above the forest and lit the ground with a pale, cold light. The lake was dark and still. They walked in silence. Then they heard a sound. At first it was faint, like someone splashing in the water. Then came laughter, light, clear, like a young girl laughing. Her mother suddenly stopped. They looked at each other. At first they thought they had imagined it. But the sound came again, water moving, and that strange laughter. In the dark forest it sounded very wrong. The girl felt a kind of fear she had never felt before. Her mother whispered, "Stay here, do not move. I will see what it is." She slowly pushed through the bushes toward the shore. The girl crouched down and waited. The forest was quiet, only the water and that laughter. A few minutes passed. Then suddenly her mother ran back out of the bushes. She grabbed her daughter's hand and started running. They ran without looking back. She pulled the girl so hard that it hurt, but the girl didn't ask any questions. One look at her mother's face was enough. Something had terrified her. Soon they saw the lights of the village. They had actually been very close. After that night, the mother changed. For a whole week she was quiet and distant, as if something heavy was on her mind. Then one day she said to her daughter, "Uliana, I will die soon." The girl became frightened. "Mother, why would you say that?" But her mother replied quietly, "Do you remember the lake in the forest? Those were Rusalki. When I reached the shore, I saw them. They looked like young women, long loose hair, pale faces. They were sitting by the water and laughing at me. In the lake, they were washing a white cloth, a burial shroud. One of them looked at me and said, 'Ustia, come here.' I was terrified. I didn't understand how they knew my name. Then one of them laughed and said, 'We know everything, Ustia.' And she lifted the cloth from the water and showed it to me. She said, 'You will die soon. Not much time left. We are preparing your shroud.' That's when I ran. 4 months later, Ustia died. Uliana and her younger siblings were taken in by distant relatives. Most of the younger children did not survive. Only one brother lived. Life with those relatives was hard. They treated Uliana poorly and forced her to do the hardest work in the house. And that is how she grew up, an orphan. This happened a few years ago during a work trip. I arrived in a small provincial town and checked into a hotel. After leaving my things in the room, I decided to take a walk in the evening. The streets were almost empty. I stopped at a small store, bought a can of beer, and opened it as I stepped outside. Right then I heard a hoarse voice behind me. "Hey, can you spare a drink?" I turned around. An old man was standing in the shadows. He looked homeless. At first I couldn't clearly see his face. I'm not a greedy person, but I didn't feel like going back into the store, so instead I pulled some money from my pocket and held it out to him. He stepped closer. And then I saw his face. I felt cold inside. I had never seen anything like it. Deep scars ran from the corners of his mouth almost all the way to his ears. It looked as if someone had once torn his mouth open. His entire face was covered with smaller scars. Because of nerve damage, his face was frozen in a strange smile. He wasn't actually smiling, but it looked like he was. And something about that smile felt terribly wrong. A chill ran down my spine. I handed him the money and quickly walked back toward the hotel. That night I barely slept. I had seen people with terrible injuries before, but this felt different. It felt like something dark was looking back at you. The next morning at work, I casually asked a local colleague if he knew the man I had seen. He immediately understood. "You mean Jack?" he said. "That's a long story. I'll tell you at lunch." And at lunch he began. From here on, this is what he told me. Years ago, Jack was the most handsome guy in town. Girls loved him, but he was cruel, arrogant, mean, always looking for someone to bully. With his group of friends, he made life miserable for many people. He broke hearts, ruined relationships, and did it all for fun. Then one day, everything changed. A woman moved into town with her son. The boy's name was Nicholas. He was 16, but had autism and behaved more like a child. He liked to sit near the sandbox and watch the other kids play. One day the kids began throwing sand at each other. Nicholas just sat nearby, laughing and enjoying the game. Then suddenly, one of the kids got sand in his eye and started crying. Nicholas became scared and backed into a corner. At that moment, Jack and his friends were walking by. The crying boy was Jack's nephew. Jack ran over. He saw Nicholas sitting there and decided it must be his fault. Jack began kicking him. His friends stood nearby laughing. Some of them even joked and placed bets. Then Nicholas's mother ran outside. Jack pushed her as well. Before leaving, he warned her not to let the boy outside again. Weeks passed. One afternoon, Nicholas wandered away from home while his mother was at the store. He got lost. Eventually, he ran into Jack and his friends again. They started mocking him. One held him while the others kicked him. People walked past. No one stopped. Until an old gypsy woman stepped in. She shouted at them. Jack and his friends cursed at her and told her to leave before she ended up like the boy. The woman stepped aside. She took a small bottle of water from her bag and began whispering something over it. Then she walked back. She pulled Nicholas away from them and suddenly splashed the water over all 5 of the men. They moved toward her angrily. But at that moment, a police car appeared nearby. The woman looked at them and shouted, "You don't have much time left." Then she looked directly at Jack. "And you, handsome boy, a special surprise is waiting for you." There were 5 of them, close friends. But after that day, something seemed to follow them. One died under a train. Another went to sleep and never woke up. A third burned to death in a house fire. A fourth slowly died from a terrible disease that caused his body to rot. And only Jack remained. The rest of the story came from Jack himself. One night he was lying in bed, unable to sleep. Suddenly someone knocked on his window. He froze. He lived on the 5th floor. There was no balcony. The knocking continued for almost 30 minutes. He was too afraid to move. The next night it happened again. He went to see an old fortune teller. She told him only one thing: keep your windows closed. As long as they are closed, it cannot reach you. For a while everything stopped, until one night he forgot to close the window. He woke up to a scratching sound. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Only his eyes moved toward the window. Something was climbing inside. At first he thought it was a large cat, but when it came closer, he realized it was not a cat. The body looked like an animal, but the head was something else entirely. Not human, not animal. Its eyes were huge and round like an owl's, and the smell was unbearable. The creature jumped onto him. Its claws tore into his face. He could not move. He could not fight back. Then it grabbed his mouth and tore it open. After that, it jumped back through the window and disappeared. His body suddenly released. He ran to the neighbors and pounded on their door. When the woman opened it, she fainted immediately. Doctors later said they had to rebuild his face, piece by piece. When he told the police what had happened, they sent him to a psychiatric hospital. He stayed there for 2 years. When he returned, his apartment had been sold. His sister refused to take him in, and since then he has lived on the street. That's where my colleague finished the story. The strange thing is that many people in the town know it, and they all tell it the same way. I never asked Jack about it myself, and honestly, people say it's better to keep your distance from the cursed.